Thank you so much for joining us. This conversation is recorded for our podcast from the Mentor's Desk, and our main audience is early career or novice researchers trying to build an externally funded career in healthcare research or innovation. And this interview with Dr. Ian Eisenhauer, a newly minted emergency physician and Navy officer, is a program for the Center for Combat Research, and it's to help people think through military medical research and leadership, mentorship, teamwork in that space. So thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
As a career military officer, you've had plenty of exposure to people needing healthcare for yourself or for others. One of the things we're told as researchers is to understand the need case, understand the use case, so we can figure out what kind of research to do. Do you have any advice for researchers as they're trying to figure out, can their skills be deployed to things that the military cares about?
The way you've described your audience, it reminds me of a rank cohort internal to the United States Army, which is called the Warrant Officer Corps. And the Warrant Officer Corps is a very special group. They technically are commissioned officers, but they don't often get referred to as commissioned officers. They're also not enlisted personnel or non-commissioned officers. So they're not sergeants and they're not captains or lieutenants. But it strikes me as you describe someone who is coming out of a program that builds a level of technical expertise and now trying to bring that into an environment where they're applying that or where they're integrating that. And something that I've encouraged of our warrant officers again and again, which again sounds like a similar group, is that when you are an expert or when you have some level of expertise from a program, from a degree, from an institution, it's very easy for you to stay in that role. And that is your default position. Your default position is just to be the expert. It's not easy to be the expert. What's harder is to be the expert and to be a leader. And this group that I was describing will oftentimes overperform as the expert and underperform as the leaders. And I don't mean that as a slight against the group, but when you find those ones who do both of those well, they far outshine the others. And so, what does that really mean? Particularly when you deal with an expert and an expert has certain specific functional areas they're responsible for, specific skill sets they deliver. But when those individuals now take some developmental responsibility for those around them, when they try to apply themselves to being a part of the visioning for the organization, where is this organization going to go? Oftentimes when you're junior and you're an expert, you're not looking up and out, you're looking down and in. And you are trying to apply that expertise and you're trying to do what it is that you're responsible for to the best of your ability. Well, you have to do that, but you got to do more. You have to do that, and you have to build the team around you, and you have to have some visioning skills for where the organization needs to go. And maybe that's not the 30-year vision, but what about next year? What about 5 years? What about 10 years? And how are you helping your senior, your direct supervisor, and maybe, one of the things that we say in the Army is that the people that are really good are not only solving their boss's problems, but they're thinking about their boss's problems. That's really hard, particularly when you've got a whole bunch of stuff to do right in front of you. So bringing it back to where the space they live in, you can't jettison those responsibilities or subordinate those responsibilities, but you have to be able to do what you're directly responsible for that is aligned with your expertise while building the team around you, which may or not be a structured responsibility.
That's what I was going to actually ask you, because I'm thinking of Ian being a physician. You have your roles, and many early career people don't have that positional authority. They're like struggling so much, like, I want to lead, I want to lead, I want to lead, but they don't have the official role. So do you recommend doing these leadership activities even in the absence of the positional role to bring themselves to the attention of someone?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely, because it's habit forming. Part of being a good leader is being disciplined about your habits. And regardless of whether you have the specific responsibilities within a leadership role, or whether you're just, quote unquote, a member of the organization, you can still act in a leaderly way. And here's a couple of areas. The first thing is that you should always set the example. Like, even if you're not actively doing something that you would think is leaderly in terms of motivating someone to accomplish something, or solving some resourcing issue, or visioning the future for the organization, and all these other kinds of things, it starts with setting a positive personal example. And that's the level of preparedness that you have. That's the way that you interact with others. That's the energy that you bring and the discipline that you have regarding the task that you are affiliated with. So your personal example, setting a positive personal example, is absolutely a leader thing. And so that's a huge first cornerstone. And if you don't see the importance in that, then you need to, right? So that's a first step. A second step is realizing that every interaction that you have with another human being is an opportunity to demonstrate leadership. And it can be just in how you deal with people. Do you deal with people in a way that's developmental, in a way that builds them up and leaves them better than you found them? Or are you very transactional? One of the great fallacies of leadership is that you need some sort of legitimate authority, that positional authority somehow defines the leader. And then once you have that, well, now I'm going to grow the pie. And I would tell you that the good leaders, it's mildly interesting that they have the positional authority. The respect that they inspire and what they bring about within an organization is just as much out of reverent power as it is legitimate power. There is, getting back to kind of bases of power. You've got reverent power, that respect that causes people to never want to let you down. That's more powerful than anything. But there are other ways to kind of think about it long before you ever get to legitimate authority or legitimate power. And oftentimes, if you've settled on that spot, you've already kind of lost, because it turns into you're going to do this because I'm your boss and you will do it. So that's a piece. So we talked about setting a positive personal example. That's a leaderly thing to do. How you deal with others in a developmental way that leaves them better than you found them. And then I would tell you the other thing is that very rarely will you have someone who doesn't have peers. You're going to have peers of some sort, and it doesn't have to be a perfect clone of your position. It doesn't have to be your one of seven that all have the same job and you all sit next to each other. It could, kind of loosely be peers. Maybe you're at the same level of responsibility within a new organization, or you work in the same building, or whatever it may be. There's some aspect of commonality that provides you with a peer group. What are you doing with that peer group? Are you just a passive good guy or good gal? Like you are your investment in your peer group is just not being a jerk? Well, that's not good enough, right? You have to proactively be a good person. You have to proactively be a good teammate. A lot of people think that that the gold standard for teamwork is helping someone when they ask. But if you've waited for them to ask you for help, you haven't failed, but you've failed in an opportunity to anticipate that need and to really be, the gold standard for teamwork is helping ahead of need. is sharing your lessons learned and not just your successes and your victory laps. Oh, I did this thing that was so great and everybody loved it. Let me share that with you so that you can try to be like me, right? How about this is the thing that I really messed up. And I kind of got in a little bit of hot water because I messed it up so bad. And gosh, I really want to share this with everybody because why should you have to mess up too? If I can prevent you from stepping in this pothole, then I should. And if I do, and I'm doing that ahead of need and not because I'm being forced, that is incredible peer leadership. And it's leadership that doesn't have a transactional return immediately. And so once again, it's kind of in the broader sense of, really what should be at the basis of leadership is that you're not doing it transactionally for some sort of kickback.
So what you're saying is really the classic being a great leader, especially in those environments, is being a great follower.
Mm-hmm.
Because really, if you are a great follower and you're anticipating the needs of your leaders, you are leading amongst your peers and also helping the organization as a whole. And that's most people who do these types of things don't seem to want to be a leader because they want someone to title them. It's because they want to help the organization do better and help the people around them to continue to grow. And they end up getting put in those positions.
No, I think that's well said. And the concept of being a good follower to be a good leader in my mind or my experience is that, number one, to place a value on followership is also to place a value on humility. Because to be a good follower requires humility. And it requires the ability to support somebody else and to cede control and to, it's just a lot of good, humble, humble aspects to followership. It also recognizes that leadership is, this ecosystem. It's not just one leader in a set structure and everybody who's a follower is just waiting to be given the task of the day. It's more of kind of an ecosystem and it's all connected. And so being a good follower isn't just helping that boss. When you're a good follower, you tend to be a better peer as well.
Mm. Well, can I ask about that? Because I think in many people's minds, they think of like medicine is highly hierarchical. The military is like the prototypical hierarchy, right? And so you say jump, and doesn't everybody jump? And what role is there for great leadership or, reverent leadership, loyalty, when the system says that, like, this person says what you do and people get in line? I think talk to me about that.
My realization in my experience, and again, I've been an Army officer for 30 years, and the realization, and I don't want to say that it was a realization recently, but it certainly is different than what I believed when I first started being, kind of a more legitimate authority type leader, is that an organization that is performing on reverent power and on commitment and buy-in and the higher order things we've discussed outperforms the organization that's just rigidly obeying the chain of command. That structure exists to move the organization in a legitimate way, in an empowered, resourced way. But when you start to layer on those extra levels of commitment and cohesion and loyalty and reverence, you go the extra mile for people. You look out, you help people ahead of need. You tend to put the organization's well-being ahead of your own. You just do that much more for your peers, for the organization, in a way that you don't do when you live in a very structured transactional world. Leadership is all about getting somebody to do something that they wouldn't otherwise do. Right? And there's exceptional cases like, take the hill and knock out the machine gun nest. But there's also, ones that maybe aren't as dramatic, but are still, hey, you're gonna work twice as long on this, or you're gonna work on something you're not interested in, or you're gonna take something that maybe, you're gonna work on something while you watch somebody else work on something that you thought should have been yours, right? There's all kinds of layers of humanity that go in there, and it doesn't have to be dramatic about dying in the process, but it can still be pretty stressful and pretty disappointing and pretty conflicting, oftentimes in a moral and ethical way, even if it's not, a moral and ethical abyss. It comes down to, well, how are you going to get people to do well in those circumstances? How are you going to motivate them to do well? And it comes back to leadership is the application of influence. And so what are your influence tactics? And a part of that has to be aligned with your leadership style authentically, because if I'm going to do a bunch of things that are incongruent with my personality or with my manner, first of all, it's going to be seen a mile away by my team, and then it's not going to be effective. But secondarily, I'm not going to be as good doing it because it's not aligned with who I am. I'm not going to be as happy because I feel kind of awkward and klutzy in doing it. And so it has to be aligned, but it also has to be effective. And so as you get more experience in leadership, you start to realize that it's not just about how I want to lead you, it's about how you need to be led. And then I have to be able to see that, and I need to modify. Okay, you don't live in my world, I live in your world, because without you, I don't get anything done. And if I don't get anything done, it's over for all of us. And you may think you live in my world, because you kind of do, but only if I'm a jerk do you live in my world, right? So it's this weird inversion of whose world is it? And I would tell you that honestly, the more effective leaders see it as the subordinate's world, as the junior's world. I don't know what the right word is to use in these kind of teams, but in the military, you talk about subordinates, even though it's kind of a weird term. But you're, those who are junior to you,
right.
junior leaders.
This is a great conversation. What I often think is you've been in so many different leadership roles, and you've been in different units, different locations, different formations. I remember, learning about the shape of, the group sizes as they go up, and you'd be in C company, and then there's A and B. And could you give us some examples? Because I do think, every field takes every type, right? We've talked about like extroverts or introverts in science and medicine. There's a little both. Certainly you've seen people say, oh, be authentic, but wow, there's different styles. Have you seen in groups where you're doing it your way and you got your A and B or whatever, where you've seen leaders use quite different styles, and actually be quite good? You don't need to tell me when it doesn't work, because we're not trying to be not work. But thinking about times when you thought, I never thought this person would be that. And yet, wow, could you give us some examples? Because I know you've seen tons of these.
I certainly have. And we'll often say in the military that an organization will reflect its leader, will reflect certainly its commander in ways that you think are almost kind of crazy, almost a little bit, like you would see a parent, you'd see inside of a kid, you'd see, modeling of a parent's behavior. It's the same kind of thing. Like organizations will behave in a way that reflects the manner of the commander and how he or she prioritizes and communicates and works well with others or not, and those kind of things. And so I would just tell you that it is strikingly apparent when a leader doesn't see importance in the lateral relationships. And the units, regardless of size, that prioritize that in a way that they don't just see it as this passive, hey, I'm just not gonna mess it up, and I'm not gonna actively work to improve it, to build bridges. I'm just not gonna burn any bridges, are wildly different than the ones who actively are building bridges and are actively seeing outside of their organization. And so regardless of the size, whether we're in a platoon of 40 or a brigade of 4,500 or beyond, when that leader cultivates an environment that is not just respectful of those outside of the organization, but actively looks to build bridges with them. And again, it goes back to what we were talking about with peers. That is a hugely determining factor in the performance or outperformance of an organization, almost maybe more than anything that I've seen, is how they set themselves in relation to others. And I've seen, I know you don't want to talk about the negatives, but just it is striking when you see the organizations who build the tall castle walls. And it's a little eerie, because when you talk to the members of that organization about that leader, I mean, they love them. They love them because they are all about that organization. So it's not like they are some sort of nefarious character internal to the environment. But outside of that organization, I mean, people will get very, very negative about that individual and about their organization, and you'll see it carry on to members of that organization. Let's say we've got Alpha and Bravo.
Right.
And Alpha is all about building bridges and being a good team player and not just peacefully existing in the environment, but actively contributing to outside of their walls. And let's say Bravo is the opposite. Now let's go to the higher echelon that oversees those two entities. When something goes wrong, it's the fundamental attribution error, right? When something goes wrong, they're going to immediately say, serves them right, or that's exactly what I knew they would do. You jump to a conclusion to affirm your bias as it relates to that individual organization. The exact opposite happens with the organization that is a good team player, because something negative happens to that organization. It doesn't just have to be positive. Something negative can happen to that organization, and that higher headquarters is like, something else must be going on down there, because this isn't how they act. This isn't who they are. Call down there and see what else is going on if they need some help with something. Versus the other organization is like, serves them right. Serves them right. And that's what's happening at the next level. And the next level matters, not because, you're looking to, trot around and be praised, but the next level is making decisions about resourcing. The next level is making decisions about finite developmental opportunities. The next level is visioning the future of the organization, and it's either going to include you or not include you. So you may not spend the entirety of your day worrying about your next hire, and you shouldn't, but you also shouldn't be so absent-minded to think that it doesn't matter. And I can just lead down and in, and I can just, as long as I'm just a hero to my people, like everything else is going to work out. Like, no, it's not. And even if it does, even if you don't become cancerous, the other group has moved out. The other group has left you behind in the dust. And so it's important to think about that and know. And again, it doesn't matter the size of the team. It just doesn't have to be organizations of 5,000. It could be a group of 3. It's just that, but understanding that how you fit inside of that larger organization, regardless of what that is, it matters. And it doesn't just matter because you're trying to, brown nose or be the golden child or something. There's real practical value to being a good follower.
I'm struck by the amount of passion you have around leadership, right? Like we're talking about it actively, but it's obvious that this has been a science for you, probably from your West Point days and all the way through your career, and has been part of what's driven you to be successful. And I think that an early career person, especially who's not got the military experience and has never led a team before, is like, okay, so I need to be a really good partner, and I need to be really good at my job, and I need to try and help develop, and I need to think about my leader's job and try and take over their job. And they'd be really overwhelmed.
Mm-hmm.
How do you take that and flatten that a little and help people to see how they can bring all of that together?
Number one, set a positive personal example every day. Like, be your best self every day. And it doesn't mean that you're never gonna fail, you're never gonna have a bad day, but you have to set a positive personal example as much as possible.
Can I ask just a follow up? Like, give me a for instance. Like, are we talking, I'm just going to use our physician friends,
Right.
like, don't show up in scrubs every day, or like, are we talking about like attitude?
Do you show up 30 seconds before a requirement, or do you show up 10 minutes prior, or do you show up 10 minutes late?
Okay.
And was there a reason for that? If you're 10 minutes late because you were doing something of equal or greater importance that was out of your control, then I got it. Like, I'm a busy guy too. But if you're showing up 30 seconds prior or 10 minutes late because you're full of yourself, or because you don't have the self-discipline to be a professional, then don't come back around and complain when people don't give you a developmental opportunity that's commensurate with your potential for increased responsibility. Like, you want increased responsibility, show me. Setting a positive personal example is, first and foremost, it's a self-discipline thing. Do you look the part? Do you act the part? Are you ready for the day? Or are you just kind of rolling with the punches? And, I've talked to our young leaders all the time about, look, I just was coaching up a group of them last week. I talked to our company commander and first sergeant course, and it's these new leaders. They're about, the company commanders are about 25 to 27. They got about 5 to 7 years of work experience. And they found themselves all of a sudden with a bunch of real responsibility in a way, it's like a phase leap in the career progression. And I told them, look, your peers are regularly going to just kind of roll with the punches. It doesn't mean they're going to be late, or they're going to be, messing off or doing the wrong thing necessarily, but they're going to just kind of stay alive. And there's a difference between taking a stay alive, status quo, caretaker approach and preparing. Preparing and showing up ready and taking charge and making things happen. Like, that's what I mean with a positive personal example. But there's the equally as important second piece of it, which is the whole emotional intelligence aspect, which is usually lost on the youth. And that is, self-management. It's self-control. It's suspending judgment. It's having some emotional self-control. Not thinking that just because you're the leader that you can torture everyone with your inner, now outer monologue. Nobody cares. Think before you speak and show some emotional control. And if you're going to start running off at the mouth and saying things that maybe you shouldn't have said, or reacting emotionally, or confusing your preferences with priorities, sometimes a leader, a self-righteous leader will confuse their personal preferences with organizational priorities. Just because you like something a certain way doesn't make it law, because you're the leader, right? And so whenever we talk about this, we'll say, hey, look, the very first thing, if we're going to sit down and we're going to talk about expectations, the very first thing I'm going to talk to you about is what the organization expects of you. Because I am here as the organization's designated agent to oversee you. I'm not here because you're in my world, right? It's not my world. I am the organization's representative in its world. And so you have to be able to kind of walk that line. And so the first and most important thing is set a positive personal example. And it's free, and you can do it, and you don't need power, and you don't need position. You just have to have discipline. Okay, so that's kind of step one. Step two is take peer leadership seriously, because it's the hardest kind. So if you're going to practice something that you don't have any traction with, that you don't have a hammer, and you don't have a carrot, You don't have or a stick. All you have is your ability to influence.
Right. And maybe we would call that low stakes, right?
Yeah.
Like, don't wait till you're actually in charge to practice, right?
And there is a benefit, because not only is it hard and it's free, but it is the vessel for reputation building. You build your reputation upon how you interact with your peers. And that's how you're going to be remembered. And so taking that seriously is also free. And I would attest that 1 unit of effort that's applied to teamwork will return 2 units of effort to your own good. I would make that argument every day, twice on Sunday, that it is a positive investment. Teamwork is a net positive, not just a transactional net zero. Like, I'm going to do it so that I don't lose it, or I'm going to tread water so I don't drown. Like, you're gonna put it in and you're gonna get more back. So again, you can either be on the high ground morally and ethically and say it's the right thing to do because that's how you treat others, or you could be a very practical, take a more pragmatic approach and say it's a net positive investment, right? And so that's the second thing. And then the third thing is, look, you don't have to think about your boss's problems or vision for the organization. I mean, those are kind of heady terms that are going to come more as you become more senior, but you also shouldn't have your head in the sand about what your organization exists for. What is the purpose of your organization? And I don't mean your small team. I mean the organization. If the last time that you looked at the vision statement for your organization was when you applied for the job, then it's probably not recent enough. Like, you should know the purpose of your organization. You should know if they have a 2030 plan or a 2050 plan, campaign plan, or whatever it is, whoever's doing the visioning for your organization, like, you should read their stuff. I mean, if you're ignorant of it, then you're not, you're not plugged into the organization, because if you're at least informed, then you're going to be postured to maybe make a decision on something you wouldn't have otherwise made. And so I think those 3 things are easy, not easy like they happen easily, but they're easy in terms of they're at your fingertips. Number 1, positive personal example. If you don't have self-discipline, get some and practice it, because it's habit forming and the best leaders have good habits. The second thing is take peer leadership seriously, because teamwork is a net positive. And then the third thing is, you don't have to live in the space of the strategic leader, but be aware and informed of what your organization is about, their purpose, their vision, their 2030, 2040, 2050 plan, whatever it is, so that when you get into the elevator with the CEO, you can actually talk about something other than the weather.
Is there ever a time when, because we've also, when you talk to very accomplished senior people, from the outside, it looks like everything worked out exactly how I said, right? It's just like, I did this and then I did this, and it all built to this amazing moment. But actually, probably there were some unanticipated turns, forks in the road. Maybe your choice was a good one, sometimes maybe not so much. Maybe you were forced to take a fork in the road through no fault of your own. It's just like the world happened. Can you talk about, I think just because everybody has those moments, and yet you made it. Can you talk about, moving forward, feeling like you're still the captain of your own ship, you're in charge of your destiny, even when there are these adverse moments?
So yeah, I do a bunch of stuff here, because I feel like I've lived that, and I probably would have someone in my profession look at my bio and say, "Oh, must be nice." But in reality, there's a bunch of twists and turns and doors in my face, and times I had to eat my vegetables and do all kinds of other things that you would think, oh, it's over, I'm done, or what the hell am I doing, type thing. Right. Because it doesn't just have to be a professional door in the face where you think you didn't make the cut. It could also be, hey, we really want you, but we're going to need you to do this. A couple of things. So first off, I would tell you that looking back on just my own journey, and I would assert that this isn't unique to my profession, but it is part of my personal story. When I look back across my career, the jobs that I didn't want, or that I did, if you would have asked self-righteous me at that point in time and space, shouldn't have been given to me, those were some of the most developmental, most rewarding jobs. And the ultimate irony, and this is coincidental, maybe it's not, I look back and some of my deepest, closest lifelong friends, to include like godparents of my children, were made while I was doing those jobs. And I can't help but think that all has to do with something, right? That it was a developmental piece where maybe I didn't really know what I needed at that point in time. Or even if I didn't need that, maybe it rounded me out in a certain way, or it helped me to have a different perspective about a group of people that I would ultimately then be responsible for. Because this is the thing, if you don't plan on necessarily, and you don't know maybe what you're going to do, but ultimately, the more senior you get, the more diversity you're going to have beneath you. And I don't mean diversity in maybe the normal, the common parlance, but I mean diversity in like types of organizations. So even if you're a specialist of a certain kind, you think about the difference of being, an emergency medicine physician versus running a hospital, right? You're still in the same organization, but now you've got 100 other types beneath you, and you're having to, to be smart about how you lead and mentor those groups. So that's one thing, just from my own personal experiences, that I've found, even though I didn't think that was the right thing at the time, in retrospect, hard and fast, those were some of my most developmental things. The other piece that I talk to our young leaders about a lot is that I feel like it is a all too common myth that there is this set path. Mm-hmm. Like my assertion is that the standard path is a non-standard path. And that's what I tell them. The standard path is a non-standard path. Find me a person who's walked the standard path, and I would tell you that they're the non-standard vignette. It's true, but in our minds, we perceive it, and therefore we start to make all kinds of irrational assertions and conclusions and maybe even decisions about a point in time and space that we're at, because we believe, it's a giant bias, right? So if we just can agree that the standard path is a non-standard path, that helps you to reframe things, and now it's not such a dire consequence when you've got to do something else in addition to your job or as another job. Next thing I would say is that what I've experienced over time, and this is a common question that I'll get from junior leaders, is, do you still enjoy it? Are you still having fun? Do you still, and in a more articulate way, are the reasons that you decided to serve in the first place the same reasons that you serve now? And while I would say that yes, in general, there are things that are common across the experience, I would also tell you that what is fulfilling for me as a 52-year-old brigadier general are not the same things that were fun and fulfilling for me as a 25-year-old second lieutenant. I mean, they're just not. Like, what I would consider to be like the best day ever as a lieutenant is not what I consider to be the best day ever as a brigadier general. And that doesn't mean that I wouldn't still enjoy doing that day, but I've just got a different, I just run at a different level. I do different things. I find fulfillment in different areas that when I was a younger, soldier, I would have thought would sound really like boring. Or mundane or not like soldiering.
Right.
I would say, well, that sounds more like managing. But when you're leading a large, diverse, distributed organization to accomplish this complex task that is just, when you can bring an organization together to do something really hard and well, just, against all odds, like, that's really fulfilling for me. And that's, you could maybe say, oh, well, that sounds just like when you're doing, but it's not the same. Mm-hmm. So your definition of success changes, your definition of fulfillment changes as you get older. Just like the stuff you used to do for fun in high school is not the stuff you do for fun now. It's just not. And you may break out the old cassette tape occasionally and still like the music, but you don't listen to that music every day long, all day long. So that's another piece. And then the last thing I would tell you is that one of my favorite mentors, when asked about career guidance, gave some of the most succinct and enduring guidance that I've ever heard, and it was this: seek hard jobs and do them well. So that's something that I think also kind of helps you to strip away the nuances of, well, that's not what I envisioned, or, well, that's not the position that I'm at, or, well, that's somehow feedback to me is it a hard job? Because if it's a hard job, they're not going to put just anybody in it. And if it's a hard job, then, quit talking and just go do it well. Right? And if you're seeking hard jobs and doing them well, and then after you have a period of continuous performance and you look back and now you've had 5 jobs and you've done them well now, what's your organization think about you at that point? They start to see your potential for increased responsibility. So those are just some thoughts on what you're saying, but the standard path is a non-standard path. And if you're having a door closed, take a number. It's a long line. It's a long line of people who've had doors closed
right.
in their lives. And I think you'd be hard pressed to find somebody who hasn't. And if they haven't, then I'd tell them they haven't lived.
Then I don't believe them. Yeah, right. Exactly. Yeah. I mean, I think about, I wanted a particular position and I was so insulted that I didn't get it. Like, what are you talking about? I mean, I'm the person. I didn't get it. I was, my nose was a little bit out of joint, a little ego issue. And it wasn't that long after, the position was filled and things went by, I thought, what was I thinking? That sounds like a horrible, and I don't think it was pure rationalization. It was just like looking at it from a different perspective. And then I thought, wow, I dodged a bullet with that one. There are a lot of things that changed because I didn't take that then made my sort of opportunity set open, and then something really, really special came along. And I think, you look back, you could probably name really specific times, right? Or like you say, you were given a job you really didn't want, or you did a study you didn't want, or it didn't go the way you want, and you did it anyway, and whatever, you muddle through, but something really quite positive did bloom from that.
This was a great set of leadership lessons, and I really appreciate you kind of bringing it down to core principles. I think people can take away very easily kind of what can I do tomorrow, which I think is the key.
Yeah.
So
can I have one shot?
Absolutely.
Please. Final shot
yeah,
here.
Anything.
Last recommendation is, have a thick skin. Leadership is hard. Just because it's out there and you have some interest in it and you see people do it well or not do it well or whatever it may be, it's an inexact science, if you want to call it a science. I think it's a blend of art and science, but it's lonely at the top. You have to have a thick skin, and it's a purposeful and fulfilling endeavor. But that doesn't mean that it's always rosy. And that's, kind of building on our last answer about, where do you draw your fulfillment and what did you think you were going to do versus not do and all those other kind of things. Like if you think that every day as a leader is going to be a victory lap, or that every, team member you interact with is just going to bring you joy, they're not. And that doesn't mean that they're bad people or that you're a bad person, but that's the challenge. And so it's hard, but hard things are worth doing. And if it was easy, everybody'd be doing it, right? If it was easy, everybody'd be a leader, but they're not, right? So you have to have a thick skin. You have to have some, as Teddy Roosevelt would say, stick-to-itiveness. You have to have a little bit of grit. And you just have to ground yourself in the human domain. And that, I think, is probably the lesson that I most distinctly didn't know or didn't practice as an early leader. I was more just point me towards the task and turn me loose, and point me towards the task and turn me loose. And I'm just going to work harder, and I'm going to, lead better, and I'm going to try more, whatever it may be. I'm just going to,
Effort was the
I'm
name
going to be,
of the game.
I'm going to be an achiever, right? I'm going to get results. You're just a get results machine. And that's fine. That's not, that's not wrong. But I would just tell you that as you get in touch with the human domain side and with the emotional intelligence side, the EQ of things like empathy and self-management, self-regulation, self-control, these are really hard things, and they're hard for you to do inside of your own mind. They're even harder to do in the immediate world around you, but when you can start to crest the hill and start to do those things well and do them well routinely and start to define yourself as a leader by those behaviors to where your teams say that's how that person leads, it is like, it's like wildfire. And it's really, really powerful for an organization. It makes leadership so much easier. Things like vulnerability. Vulnerability is a superpower, which you never would have known growing up in the Army, right? It was never let them see you sweat, never let them see you eat, never show emotion, never quit. Like you would die rather than quit. But the grand aha is that people are motivated by people. Like humanity is this huge skeleton key to people's motivation. And if I can connect with you as a person, you're way more likely to go the extra mile for me than just if you never saw me sweat or show emotion or quit. So I think you just got to get in touch with the human domain. You also have to realize that leadership is hard. And so just be prepared. Doesn't mean it's not worth it. It's net positive. It's net positive, but there's going to be some hard days for you. So be ready. When you have a hard day, don't think you failed. Just, do a little self-critique and look in the mirror first, because it might just be your fault. It likely is. At least some portion of what went wrong is your fault.
Find the part that's your fault.
So just like whenever, show me the person that's never had a door closed. And,
Exactly.
Show me a day where something went wrong that you don't own a piece of that. And I would candidly call you out as being dishonest. So just be in touch with that stuff, be in touch with the human domain, and be accountable. That's another big thing, is being accountable.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely.
We'll get you for a follow-up in the
Okay.
future. Thank you.